My name is Tyler Rundel. I'm with the U.S. Department of Labor. So I'll be doing sort of a quick talk today while everyone is sort of getting back from break before we have the next panel. So the U.S. Department of Labor is one of the funders of the Research to Action project, who you've been hearing a lot about today. So it's a project that we're really excited about and we're very happy to be supporting of. And so I'm also eager to just share a little bit more information about who we are and hopefully provide some interesting resources that we have available that could be of interest to some of you in your work. So first, just who I am. My name is Tyler Rundel. So I joined the U.S. Department of Labor just a little over a year ago, and my background is actually a researcher in geography focusing on international development. And then I spent actually a number of years moving over into the humanitarian sector, doing kind of research projects for them. And so I'm actually quite new to the sphere of labor. And so it's been quite an interesting opportunity for me over the past couple of years to learn about some of these pressing issues and see some of the latest research. And so who are we at the U.S. Department of Labor who works on these issues? So within our department, we have a Bureau of International Labor Affairs, which focuses on international labor rights around the world. And within them, we have a specific office dedicated to child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking. And so as the name implies, we focus a lot on child labor and forced labor. That tends to be our main focus, working a lot, particularly with the ILO and those labor conventions. But we also do cross over a bit and work with issues of human trafficking, particularly in partnership sometimes with our partners over at the Department of State and JTIP. So I just want to talk about a little bit of the work that our office does. So we have a couple of different units within our office that serve different functions, and a lot of them do produce research products that could be of interest to you. So the first of those units is called Research and Policy, and as the name implies, they do research. So one of their flagship products is a report that comes out called The Findings on the Worst Forms of Child Labor. And it is basically a great resource that summarizes legislation, enforcement mechanisms, policies, and social programs that countries around the world are taking to address this issue. And so if you're really doing kind of a desk review, going to work in a new context that you're not familiar with, I highly recommend this report as sort of a first stop to go and be aware of just what's happening in that context itself. Additionally, that unit also produced the lists of goods produced with child labor and forced labor. And that is itself a long list, but they do produce an annual report or an occasional report that also provides some additional discussion about some of the findings that go into that. Additionally, they do maintain as well a list of products produced with forced labor and indentured child labor. I do want to plug a little bit, a couple of our apps that we have that we're very proud of. So you can just download them to your mobile phone. You can actually see that. So the first is called Sweat and Toil. And that basically is just a really user-friendly app that you can use, and it will access all the information from those three reports. So you can just type in a product or a country that you're interested in, and it will just provide a nice summary of some of the information right there. Very user-friendly too. The other one we have is called Comply Chain. And this is more specific as a resource for the private sector and civil society organizations. This is mostly for companies and industry groups, and it provides basically a step-by-step guide on the critical elements of creating social compliance systems. So if any of your research or your work involves social compliance systems, this is a really handy guide just for kind of outlining just general recommendations for those. And basically, what are some of the actions that companies can take to correct child labor and forced labor violations? So then moving on, we have another unit that does a lot of work on technical assistance projects. So we work in, I think we have about 44 active projects right now in over 46 countries with 19 different implementing organizations. And that's, I think, $220 million in active programming. And so we work with governments, private sector, and CSOs to strengthen laws, work on enforcement, policies, and social programming. And so we can't solve all the issues ourselves, but what we can do is we'll work on a lot of these projects, often as sort of a demonstration project to understand what works and what doesn't work. And so we also like to take a lot of this information and then share sort of best practices out there with other people to take more effective action. And the third unit in my office that I am personally a member of is called Monitoring, Evaluation, Research, and Learning. So first we do monitoring and evaluation of the technical assistance projects. And so this is basically when we do a project, we want to understand, what are good practices in the project, what are some of the challenges they face, and kind of what are the progress that they do. And so we take that information and that goes into our learnings. And we use those learnings basically as a resource for other people implementing similar types of projects so that they can learn from our projects and do theirs better. And so on our website, we have great resources that are available for both practitioners, but also useful for researchers to try and understand, what are some of these best practices and challenges, and what are some of the takeaway lessons that other people can use. We are also developing something which we call our knowledge management portal, which is going to be even more user-friendly way to access different learnings by topic, by intervention type, by country. So you can keep an eye out for that. It's going to be launching in just a couple weeks, but that'll be even more user-friendly. And we also have a number of just synthesis reports. So it's going to be kind of a one-stop report that'll summarize some of the key findings that we've accumulated over the past couple of years or on a specific thematic area. And lastly, the Merle unit also does research. So we help support a lot of different research activities. So one of the things we do a lot is funding the ILO in prevalence studies around the world, trying to understand what are the rates of child labor or forced labor, which is useful for countries for policy reasons themselves. But these also help feed into the global estimates, which are quite important for our overall understanding about what's happening in the world. And prevalence estimates are also really important just to do over time so that we can kind of track progress and understand if we're moving in the right direction or if we need to take more corrective actions in certain areas or certain topics. We also support impact evaluations and things like randomized control trials. So when we are doing projects, we like to understand not just were they implemented well or not, but are they actually achieving the desired effect that we want? So sometimes a project might be run really, really well, but it doesn't actually reduce child labor or forced labor. And so we need to understand that as we want to then advocate for certain programs, other ones, about which ones actually make that impact that we want to see. We're also doing a lot more work recently on supply chains. That's a really important issue coming up for a lot of people out there. So trying to understand how do we study supply chains to identify where in them is child labor an issue? How do we improve enforcement? How do we do more monitoring in supply chains? And this is sort of a new area for us. So we're still exploring a number of different analytical approaches, trying to understand which of these are kind of most important and relevant. And also we just fund a number of other sort of ad hoc research projects. So one of those is the Research to Action project, and one that we're particularly proud of because they have been producing such really interesting resources, both for us as policymakers, but for researchers and basically all the stakeholders who are out there. And I think it's a really excellent one. Just a few more notes. So why do we support research? So why is the US government and the Department of Labor interested in funding research? The short answer is we want to support evidence-based policymaking. So the United States government does have policies that affect child labor. And so we want those policies to be grounded in solid evidence so that we can actually achieve the objectives that we're interested in. And so to end child labor and forced labor, we really need to know about what works and what doesn't work and use that to inform our policies. But we also then want to share that information with all the other stakeholders who are out there so they can also be effective in achieving their own objectives. We cannot end child labor and forced labor on our own. But we can help to share the knowledge that we generate with other governments, NGOs, CSOs, researchers, and various other stakeholders. And through doing that, we can help support them in their efforts also, so that collectively we can take great effort to ending these labor violations. And so how do we support research? We support a range of different activities, as I alluded to before. So our research and policy unit will do this continual collection of data to understand what different countries are doing in terms of child labor and forced labor policies and practices. And then that information is always available to people to access as they need it in real time. And then our TAC unit, Technical Assistance Unit, is piloting these technical assistance projects. And then our M&E unit is collecting that information and publishing the learnings for other people to improve their practices on similar technical assistance projects. Our impact assessments and RTCs are ways for us to understand the types of projects that actually make an impact on child labor and forced labor, so that we can advocate for certain types of interventions over other ones. And then our research projects were due also just so we can have these deeper understanding of the issues. We also like to test new methods. We like to pilot different ones. For example, with even prevalence estimates, there's a number of different ways that we can do this. With forced labor, that's one of the big issues these days. For instance, household surveys might not be the best way to do it. Sometimes they can underrepresent. So what are some of these alternative approaches we can take to getting better estimates? And also doing things like developing new tools. So that's one that Research in Action is working on. So things like the research agendas are quite useful for people to understand where should we prioritize future research. The evidence gap maps are a great one just as a resource for researchers to go and access what are the existing literature that's out there and where there's still gaps. And also then just a resource for if I'm interested in, say, remittances and child labor, I can go to that instantly and then find out what is sort of the summary of evidence that's available for there. But we're also just really proud to also support just peer research. It's one thing for us to find, areas that are particularly relevant to us as an organization, but it's also great just to fund people to research whatever they think is their own area of interest. And so that's why we're really proud to support Research to Action in funding the seed grants and the fellows, because they will often find sort of new areas that never even occurred to us. And that sort of peer research to investigate other areas really leads to a lot of new insights and innovations that we often might have missed before. And so we're, again, really proud to be supporting this initiative, and I'm really happy to be here today. And it looks like we're just about half past, so I'm going to turn it back to Lorraine, who's going to introduce the next panel. So thank you all again. Goodbye.